Based on my experiences, I'm totally convinced that river cruising is only for some travelers, and here is why. I've been on numerous river cruises in Europe, Asia and Africa, but found they work best when I want to visit a region or country that has one of two key issues. First of all, where I worry about the language, the culture, the currency, the logistics of getting around. I worry that it'll be complex, challenging, or stressful to deal with doing it any other way. For me, for example, that was Vietnam and Cambodia, both of which absolutely fascinated me, but looked daunting to travel through. But taking a river cruise, as I found out, made it easy and simple because the line handled all of it with my across-Europe ship, actually ending up being my moving hotel. I lost no time commuting from place to place, and that became scenic cruising. However, I don't find traveling around Western Europe as daunting because I know it well, and so I found my river cruises here were okay, but not amazing. But speaking to others on board, many were coming to Europe for the first time, and they said actually touring Europe looked horribly complex to them due to things like the different languages, culture, currency, and moving by train or planes between all different countries to see everything. And so a river cruise worked so well for them by simplifying it all. You know, a river cruise drifting through multiple European countries, for example, on a classic Danube cruise, meant them and I saw a slice of Germany, Austria, Slovakia, and Hungary in, as I said earlier, a less stressful way. That's why when I wanted to tour Eastern Europe, I went on an Emerald Waterways Enchantment of Eastern Europe cruise between Bucharest and Budapest, and that then ended up taking me to Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Croatia and Hungary in just 8 nights. The second time that river cruising has worked well for me is when I've been nervous about visiting a regional country due to safety and health concerns. So for example, I've always wanted to see the pyramids and the ancient sites in Egypt, but I was totally put off by security, safety fears, health concerns, the stories of being harassed, reports of even easily falling foul of authorities by doing something simple like taking photographs of the wrong thing. And also because the things I wanted to see were very spread out because, you know, the pyramids are in Cairo, the ancient Egyptian sites are in Luxor and Aswan. The logistics and complexity just looked so challenging doing it independently, but a Nile River cruise solved all of that for me. I also learned through this that even if those two factors are not an issue for any traveler that doesn't want or like getting into the nitty-gritty planning of the details and all the logistics of their vacation, you know, like how to get around, where to stay, where to eat, what the must-see places are, and the best excursions to actually go and see them, then if you're like that, a river cruise is absolutely brilliant because they handle all of that. I actually found another time river cruising works is when my vacation time is really limited and I still in a week can get a really intense overview of must-see sites or cities in a region. Now that's simply because river cruises, unlike ocean cruises, cover relatively short distances and they focus on exploring a relatively small section of a river, often also calling into 2 places a day, unlike an ocean cruise. Now, let me give you some examples. My last classic European Danube cruise on Viking covered just 330 miles in a week. That's about 47 miles a day. However, on that cruise, I got a taste of Germany, Austria, Slovakia, and Hungary, and visited 3 capital cities, Vienna, Bratislava, and Budapest. In fact, the distances were so close that the tour buses followed our trip and were the same every single day, as actually were the buses on my Nile trip, where I got to see all the major sites in a week, including Valley of the Kings, Valley of the Queens, Abu Simbel, the Temple of Horus in Edfu, Karnak Temple in Luxor, the Philae Temple in Aswan, and so much more. When I was on the Mekong, as well as cruising through remarkable rural sites, I got to tick off all the major cities of Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi in Vietnam, Phnom Penh in Cambodia, and even got to see the famous Angkor Wat temple. So it's a great way of doing a really kind of deep dive in a short space of time. However, this is also where, for me, it has several downsides that I came to realize. First of all, these are very controlled and carefully managed explorations. There's a tightly scheduled program and very limited downtime. Now, people I meet on river cruises used to ocean cruising often find this is a big challenge because while ocean is all about choice with kind of a range of suggested things to do at any one time, a daily program on river is so much more directive and very much more limited. It is, in my view, like going on an escorted tour with much more shared experience that everyone follows. The program is tight, often with early starts, has a packed itinerary of a specific time allocated for meals, then to excursions, onto talks, daily briefings, and it does require much more compliance and attention because also the schedule every day and the rhythm every day is very different because there's varied sailing times each day. And also, unlike ocean cruising, where usually cruise ships are in port for the entire day and sailing at night, this is less likely when river cruising. The sailing schedule is much more varied. So, for example, there may be a stop in one place in the morning, then sailing to another to explore another place in the afternoon, but the next day could be totally different. There is often, in my experience, little time to self-explore built into a program, to go and try local restaurants or bars by yourself, or actually just meet and interact freely with the locals. Now, people often criticize me when I talk about river cruising for saying there is little chance to self-explore on river cruises. Of course, it is possible, but generally only by missing the daily included excursions, which are bundled into the fare. And so it comes at a cost. Because if I skip them, those included excursions, I do not get refunded for them. So I would effectively be paying a premium to then go off and self-explore. On the plus side though, often there are overnight stays on river cruises. So for example, my Danube and River European cruises, we often moored for all or some of the evenings. And so in the evening after dinner, I could pop out, or even actually go and eat in town. On my Mekong River cruise in Phnom Penh, for example, I was able to go out after dinner and stroll into a night market close by. And on my Nile cruise, we were actually docked 6 of the 7 nights of the actual cruise. While some European river cruises have some choice within those included excursions, it's also important to note that that's not always the case. On my Mekong and Nile ones, there was only 1 excursion at each stop. So it is important at looking at what those sort of excursions that are included, because many people joke, particularly on European river cruises, that by the end they are simply tired of seeing cathedrals because it's cathedral after cathedral every day. I do find river cruising overall a pretty restrictive way to travel, because personally I like to have more flexibility, and so that is again something to consider. By the way, while the brochures and promotional videos show a solitary, beautiful river cruise ship cruising along the river, in my experience, that is not the case. I find most of the rivers that I've been on are very busy, especially in Europe and the Nile, with many, many ships about. And this has big implications that you need to understand. All of the ships are calling on the same key places and there are limited spots to dock at them. Now, I've found multiple ships in most locations on most of my river cruises. The most extreme I found on my Nile cruise, with up to 50 ships crammed in and docked in one place at any one time. Now, while it's not as packed in Europe, I usually find there will be several ships at each stop. This not only means the sites and places are busy because you've got tour groups heading off on each of the ships, but the ships dock in rows side by side. So this means that I'm having to walk through or over the top of multiple ships to get onto the dockside. It also means that even if I've splashed out on a cabin with a nice, beautiful floor-to-ceiling window, I often have another ship docked right slap bang up against that, literally a few feet away, making it kind of dark, and I'm literally staring into another cabin. It also means when that happens at venues like the lounge or the dining room can be a little bit dark, and that's quite a shock for many travelers. Another big plus, though, is river cruising is generally all-inclusive, and so I know before I go what my trip will cost in its entirety, and I usually just have a tiny little bill at the end. However, my watch out is that the definition of all-inclusive varies line by line. Now, most include accommodation, food, excursions and entry fees, transfers to and from the ship, Wi-Fi, and some drinks, some included at lunch and dinner only, others all the time. And the main added cost you'll find usually is just gratuities. Now, river cruise ships are small, and they have to be to fit under the bridges or through the various locks, which of course makes them more costly to run because they're small and don't have that many people. So in Europe, I find the ships tend to be between sort of 100 and 150 passengers. On the Nile, it was around 70. And on Mekong, my ship only carried 60 people. So this makes them, and river cruising, a pretty costly trip, especially if you're used to ocean cruising. It is not a cheap vacation option. Here's an indication of cruise-only costs, looking at a week-long cruise of the Danube in June next year. Even a value line like Cross Europe starts from $290, that's £227 per person per night. A mid-range on like Avalon Waterways from $440, £350 per person per night. On a luxury line like Uniworld, it's a staggering $720 or £565 per person per night. I could get a Mediterranean ocean cruise out of Barcelona at the same time from $100. That's about £78 per person on Carnival Legend, or about $170, £137 on MSC Seaview. That again is per person per night. So it's really, really expensive. The small size of ship has two other big implications that I've seen, again, come as a shock to some travelers. Again, especially those used to ocean cruising. First of all, the small number of passengers means you cannot be anonymous. Soon everybody knows who you are and pretty inevitably knows your name. So if you are a social person, you are going to absolutely love it. If you prefer to kind of lay low, just hide away in your little corner, that is going to be much, much more challenging. Now, it may come as a surprise, but I'm not a highly social person, and I actually find river cruising a little bit more wearing because of all that much more social aspect to it. And dining is always at shared tables, and so you always have to be sharing with people all the time. The other implication of size is choice on the river ships is limited. For example, most ships only have two types of cabin. These are those below the water level with the window you cannot open about 3/4 way up, and those on high levels which have floor-to-ceiling windows or perhaps a Juliet or small balcony. A couple though do have kind of bigger suites these days as well. In terms of facilities, most ships I've been on just have one dining room, usually with buffet breakfast and lunch and a served dinner. Only a few, say like Amber Waterways, have a second dining venue. They will have a lounge, come bar for briefings and any entertainment, a sun deck, where some will actually have a plunge pool. Some also have a small fitness center and massage room. They don't have things like a medical center or a casino, for example. Entertainment too is pretty limited, with usually a pianist, and they perhaps bring some local entertainers brought on a couple of the nights. Now, despite what lines say, in my experience, I also learned that river cruising is still mostly set up for and catering to older travelers, or in fact those who do prefer a more curated and organized way to travel, as I explained a little bit earlier. Now, some lines are definitely trying to shift a little bit more to attract families with more like interconnecting cabins, more family activities and school holidays. But based on the itineraries, based on the tours, I'm still not yet convinced it's a family vacation, also because of that price. It can be difficult, I think, for solo travelers too, which I've done most of mine on, by the way. There are few solo cabins, few solo deals, no solo programs, and on most trips I find it's couples or groups of friends. So actually breaking into these can be a little bit difficult, and I often find I feel I'm trying to kind of edge my way onto a table at dinner with others for the evening meal, and I feel a bit like a spare wheel, to be honest, at times. I also feel it's not ideal for travelers with mobility issues. Not all ships have elevators to all levels. Excursions are mostly walking, bike tours. As I mentioned earlier, you might be walking over or through ships to get to land. They dock in places that have challenges. In Europe, it's kind of steep ramps to get on land, cobbled streets. In Egypt, it was dusty paths, steps, uneven surfaces. And in Mekong, the same. And in fact, it was about getting in and out of small boats because we didn't actually dock in many places. If I've sparked your enthusiasm and river cruising does sound ideal for you, watch this video where I talk about the 6 best river cruises in the world, starting with my favorite of all time. See you over there.